sometimes people don't really know where they need to change. Like everything feels dissatisfying, and they don't feel like they're living a life of meaning. And I find that like when you really kind of dig in there and you really look at all the areas of life where they're dissatisfied, sometimes it's distilled down to just a couple main areas that if you, and honestly, I find that this spiritual component tends to be one of those things, because I think spiritually, we will kind of, whatever's happening on the outside of our life often tends to parallel what's happening with us spiritually. And so, but not always, but anyway, when you can kind of find like, there are these two main areas that if you could just make a little bit of movement, lean in a little bit, maybe find one practical thing that would help you lean into that and start to see some change, you've got this kind of snowball effect. And, I work with a lot of small business owners as well in my practice. And we talk about the 80-20 principle, and now I've just started talking to all my clients about that. But, the 80-20 principle is basically like 20% of what you do might produce 80% of the results, right? So if you have an area of change where you're stuck and you're not satisfied, or you're not feeling like you're living a life of meaning, well, are there just one or two things that you can do that is actually going to make a big difference? And so I approach a lot of it like that. And then also, I really look at how, importance and confidence, right? So do you really feel like this particular change is really important for you to make? Because sometimes people will say, well, you need to do this, and this, right? People outside of just people. And so they will think, well, I have to do everything because everything is important. But for that particular person, not everything is important. So I always want to know, what do you feel is important? And even if you don't know what that change looks like, that's part of our job in therapy room, is to figure that out together. But also, how confident do you feel? Because if you need to make this huge change and you have no models, or you don't know anybody who's done it, you have no idea how to even begin any of it or maintain it, and you feel really a lack of confidence, well, that's also part of my job, is to figure out, well, when else did you do some really difficult things? And how can we try to increase that sense of confidence that you can do something hard? You can do something you've never done before. You've done it before, and so you can do it again. We just have to put some systems in place to help you do that. And I really like to do that because, when people get into depression or anxiety or grief, we just naturally, our minds, we forget about what we do well and what we have overcome. And so I love to be able to bring those things up for people and draw that out of them, because they have a lot of evidence from their own life that, wow, I forgot about that thing 15 years ago. That was a hard time. And look what I did there. And how did I make that happen? Or what was going on environmentally that supported me to be able to do that? We have all kinds of evidence from our own life about how we can make change and we can find support. And I just don't ever want people to forget about that. It's like, I kind of feel like it's our own personal Bible. That if you wrote the story of your life and all these different trials and tribulations and what happened in those situations, it's like you can see a lot of evidence of redemption and peace, and so I like to remind people of those things.
It really surprises me at how often people forget what they've done and how they've been successful in the past. But I think that really is a big part of our job, is to just remind them that you've done this before. You have the strength to do this. You are a survivor,
right?
And you
a
can
thriver
as well. Yes,
and you can thrive.
You can do it.
And another part and piece, I think, of change is fear itself. I'm afraid that if I change, then I have to maintain that change. I don't know how to maintain that change, or all the expectations now. If I've changed, everyone's gonna look at me, and I'm expected to follow through. Or just the fear of, how do I even start? And remembering I have gone through those things, but I think fear can be a big problem. And so if there's fear that's blocking a change, then that's also where I like to try to dig in and work and kind of see where's that fear coming from. Because then if we can dispel those fears, or if we can process those fears, and they usually have something to do with something else, I mean, then that change might become easier.
Well, and okay, sorry, I know we're kind of moving on. So the other thing I think about that is, talking about the systems, like the family systems, one of the things, like especially when I'm working with people with a chronic illness or an invisible illness that other people can't readily see, to make a change means that the system is going to change. If I do something different, well, that's going to require people around me to do something different. And by nature, we want the system to stay the same, right? And so I always talk to people about how our system, like our friendship systems, our family systems, our work systems, even our spiritual community systems, we're kind of like a thermostat, right? So if you're here and your temperature is at 70 and you are like, I don't really like 70, it doesn't really feel that good for me. And so you're in therapy and you're saying, I want to make a change, and we move your temperature up to 75. Well, by nature, the thermostat's going to say, well, 75 is not what the set temperature is. And so everybody's going to push back to make you go back to your 70 degrees, because that's where everybody else is comfortable and where everybody else is, that's how they've been doing their relationship with you. And so that's one of the risks of therapy, honestly, is that when you're coming to therapy and we're going to help you make a change, well, your system is going to push back a little bit, hopefully in a nice, gentle way. But, I always want to prep people for that, because that is just how systems work. We have physical systems that suggest, feedback loops in our cars and feedback loops on thermometers or thermostats. But we really have that same feedback loop in our systems. And so that's something for people to be aware of. And I think that's a fear that comes up is, if I do this different, I don't know how my husband is going to respond. I don't know how my child is going to respond, or my friend, or that can be really scary, because what if they lose that person?